Another page, another document, another reminder that I hadn't been erased, just ignored. We reviewed the tax records, the home equity line, the joint savings account. My name was everywhere he'd forgotten to look. He assumed you'd walk away, the lawyer said, not unkindly. But legally you didn't. He leaned back in his chair, assessing me differently now. Not as a victim, but as a woman sitting on a sleeping giant of leverage. You have options, he said. I didn't nod. I didn't smile. I just waited. You can force a sale. You don't need his permission. As long as your name remains on the deed, you can initiate a petition action. Or if you want something quieter, you can list your share for sale. He either buys you out or the house goes. Silence settled between us like dust. It wasn't joy I felt. It wasn't even triumph. It was relief. A quiet, clean, precise relief. Like finding the emergency exit in a burning building you built with your bare hands. What happens if he refuses? I asked. He shrugged. Then he learns what the law thinks of assumptions. I let the words sink in. No rage. No shouting. Just truth. He offered to draft a plan. I accepted. We reviewed next steps. Paperwork. Filing fees. Realtor referrals. My signature, not my screams, would change everything. I left with a folder under my arm and no apology in my heart. There was no need for revenge. No need to scream on porches or send angry letters or scratch paint off walls in the middle of the night. I wouldn't make a scene. I would make a sale. And not because I wanted to hurt him. Because I needed to free myself. And for the first time in what felt like years, I felt the faintest flicker of control return to my fingertips. Not the control you beg for, the kind you own. He had built his second life on a foundation he didn't check. A foundation I had laid, with my name signed beneath every brick. Now I would quietly remove it. Let him feel the tremor. Let them both wonder where the ground went. I drove home not with fury in my veins, but precision in my steps. I began gathering the rest of the papers. Receipts. Letters. Proof. I called the realtor the next morning. Spoke calmly. Used phrases like mutual property division and legal authority. Never once raised my voice. Never once told them what this was really about. Because it wasn't about them anymore. It was about me. Getting back what I never should have lost. Dignity. Agency. Power without noise. I didn't plan some elaborate revenge. I didn't plot to see them beg or crawl. I didn't want their pain. I wanted my peace. So I followed the law. I followed the paper trail. I followed the silence back to something solid. And I did it all without slamming a single door. Because when you know what you're worth, you don't need to shout it. You just prove it in print. I didn't plan revenge. I planned closure. I waited. Not because I was unsure. Not because I needed more time. I waited because timing is everything. Let them feel safe. Let them decorate. Let them believe the story was theirs now. From a distance, I watched their little transformations unfold like the opening act of a play that didn't know it was headed for a collapse. The porch was their first project. I noticed it one afternoon. Strings of solar lights dangling from the railing like cheap jewelry. Decorative signs with phrases like live, laugh, love in store-bought fonts. I had once hung a wind chime there. Hand-carved. A gift from my sister. They took it down. Said it was too noisy. They replaced it with a succulent wreath. I almost laughed. A week later, I saw them unloading bags of throw pillows, rolled up rugs, a pastel birdbath she likely found on sale. The yard had been stripped of its edges, its old familiar mess. The lived-in texture of my life replaced with catalog comfort. The front room curtains went up next. Not the lace ones I hand-stitched during a winter storm when the power was out. No, these were thick, gray, and sterile. The kind that block light and hold nothing in. I watched from my car, same parking spot as always. She was standing on a step stool, smoothing out a wrinkle near the curtain rod. He stood behind her, offering instructions, laughing like this was some sort of new beginning. They thought they were building. They thought this was growth. But they were renovating a house they didn't own. Not entirely. The irony was rich. Almost beautiful. She was polishing my windows while I prepared to sell them from underneath her. He was changing doorknobs while I drafted a termination of joint tenancy. They made grocery lists. I made appointments. They hung mirrors. I gathered comps. They hosted neighbors for dinner. I filed preliminary notices with the realtor, who smiled and said, "It won't take long." I knew, because I knew the bones of that house better than anyone. I knew what cracked when it rained. I knew which corners sloped slightly left. I knew how to make it glow for just long enough to sell. Let them set the table. Let them plant flowers in soil that didn't belong to them. It was almost merciful, letting them play pretend, letting them fall into the illusion of permanence. She once posted a photo on social media. I don't follow her, but someone sent it to me. The caption said, "Home is where love lives." I tilted my head when I read it. Love doesn't live there. Ownership does. And only one of us still had the legal claim. I began preparing quietly, slowly, scheduled an appraisal, emailed the legal team, organized the documents into a crisp folder, color-coded and sharp. I didn't knock on the door. I didn't send a warning. What's the point in screaming at people who think they've already won? Better to let them dance in their confidence. Better to let them host another brunch. Toast with wine under fairy lights on the patio I pressure washed every spring. Let them brag about the new backsplash. Let them post a photo of the guest bathroom makeover. Let them dream, because dreams fall harder than expectations. I remember the day they installed the chandelier. I was there, just across the street. She stood beneath it, admiring her own taste. He kissed her on the cheek. I watched the light bounce off the glass and thought, that sparkle doesn't come from the fixture. It comes from not knowing what's about to hit you. I didn't hate them. I didn't even envy them, because they weren't winning. They were decorating a stage that was about to go dark. And I was holding the switch. Every curtain they hung, every wall they painted, every drawer they filled with silverware they picked out together, was rooted in the assumption that I was gone. And they were so sure of that, so smug in their domestic delusion. But assumptions are fragile things, like glass chandeliers, like fairy lights in storm season. I didn't have to raise my voice. I didn't have to touch a single brick. I just had to wait, because they forgot something simple. Foundations aren't built from paint and pillows. They're built from paper, from signatures, from names etched in deeds and rights they never questioned. I didn't remind them. I let them forget. Let them decorate. Because there's something deeply satisfying about watching people prepare for a future they don't know is already ending. And when it came down, it wouldn't be chaos. It would be consequence. It's easier to break what they think can't be broken. The pen felt heavier than it should have. I cleaned every inch of that house, not out of duty, but out of love, out of hope. I scrubbed floors thinking about Thanksgiving meals and future grandchildren. I fixed torn wallpaper and loose handles like it was my legacy, like keeping it all together would keep us together. That house wasn't just wood and paint. It was a memory trap, a museum of everything we survived. He saw walls. I saw what was written between them, like the note he once left on the bathroom mirror in red lipstick. "You make this house feel like home." I never erased it, even when it faded. But now there's someone else sleeping in my bed, burning her fingers on my stove, laughing against the walls I kept standing with my own two hands. And the thing is, she'll never know. She'll never know how many times I laid awake in that bedroom, counting the ways I could fix things, soften things, survive things. She'll never know I spent 2 winters sealing the windows with plastic because we couldn't afford new ones and I didn't want him to be cold. She'll never know because she didn't build it. I did. I gave him a home when all he had was a dream. I gave him warm lights, safe walls, and a place to come back to. And he gave it away like it meant nothing. But I remember. And the house remembers, too. Because love doesn't live in bricks. It lives in the hands that laid them. And I laid the foundation. They just walked over it. The envelope was plain. No return address. No emotion. It was slipped under my coffee cup one morning, while I stirred milk into the same mug I'd used for 12 years. He didn't say a word, just placed it there and walked away like he was setting down the mail. I remember the sound the paper made as I opened it. Not a tear, just a crack, like something old giving way. Inside, my name, his name, signatures left blank, check boxes already ticked. Petitioner, him. Respondent, me. No conversation. No, let's talk. No, I've been thinking. Just documentation. Just legal language slicing through 20 years like they were expired coupons. The morning sun hit the kitchen tile and turned everything gold. I stared at the paper. The words blurred. I couldn't read them all, but I knew what they meant. He wanted out. Not later. Not eventually. Now. I didn't speak. I couldn't. He had already disappeared into the hallway, humming some nothing tune, like he hadn't just ended our life with a piece of paper and a disappearing act. Later, he asked if I'd had a chance to look over the paperwork. As if we were negotiating a car lease. I asked why now. He shrugged. We've both been unhappy for a long time. You know that. That's all he gave me. Not a reason. A summary. I wanted to scream. Not out of anger, but out of confusion. I wanted him to look at me. To say it out loud. To admit what he was doing. But he never said the word divorce. Not once. It was just moving forward. Making changes. Simplifying things. I was a complication. I didn't sign it right away. I let the papers sit untouched for a week on the edge of the kitchen table, anchored by the salt shaker. Every time I passed them, they stared up at me like unpaid bills. On the 8th day, I signed. Not because I agreed. Because I understood I was no longer a question. I was a formality. And then came the part that no one prepares you for. Not the loneliness. Not the silence. But the speed. Days. Not months. Not even weeks. Just days later, I heard it from a neighbor. Casually mentioned like it was gossip about a new haircut. Did you see her? She's pretty, but I expected someone taller. I blinked. Who? The woman he's seeing. The one moving in. I laughed because I thought it was a mistake. A misunderstanding. But later that day, I saw her car in the driveway. Our driveway. My old curtains were open. She was standing at the sink, holding a mug that looked suspiciously like mine. She moved in like a new tenant. Except I was still paying part of the mortgage. Except my name was still on the deed. Except no one asked. No one asked. Not him. Not her. Not the lawyers. Not the realtor he hired behind my back. Not even the postman who started delivering mail addressed to Mrs. with a different last name. She came in with boxes and smiles, and he welcomed her like she belonged. And I faded. He changed the locks. Never said why. Said something vague about security. As if I was the intruder now. My clothes were boxed. My photo albums were buried in the attic. My name, still on every document, had been erased in every room. No forwarding address. No apology. Just a slow deletion of everything I built. And still, no one looked at me. No one said, "Is this fair?" Not even him. I was replaced so cleanly, so quietly. It was as if I had been rented all along. As if my time had expired. As if I was nothing but a placeholder until the real thing showed up. But I wasn't a placeholder. I was the builder. The dreamer. The one who made the house warm. The dinners hot. The days survivable. And now I was the ghost. A name on a deed. And nowhere else. I drove by once. Watched them from the car. He laughed with her in the front yard, planting something new where my garden used to grow. Tulips, maybe. He never liked tulips. But she did, I guess. And he's very good at becoming what someone else wants. I learned that too late. The papers are filed. The ring is gone. The voicemail says he's unavailable right now. And I've stopped calling. Because it's not about being wanted. It's about how easily someone can unwant you. And when that moment comes, there is no conversation. Just silence. And signatures. I wasn't asked. I was removed. I drive by sometimes. Not to haunt it, just to make sure it still exists. Like touching a scar to prove the wound was real. It's on my way to nowhere now. I take the long route for no reason at all, except to see what used to be mine. The house sits there, exactly where we left it. But something's off. It's too cheerful now. Too scrubbed clean. They painted the door. A pale, lifeless beige where there used to be deep red. My red. The one I chose because it reminded me of autumn leaves and brick alleys in Paris, the trip we never took. The rose bushes are gone. The ones I planted every spring, knelt beside in the dirt with gloves 2 sizes too big. I named them, not officially but in my head. The white one near the gate was Hope. The yellow, Thursday. The red one he forgot to water, that was me. They're all gone now, ripped out like weeds, replaced with manicured hedges and polished stone. Sterile, decorative, just like everything else. The porch swing's missing, the one we built together on a humid Saturday, arguing about which bolt went where. It creaked and I loved it for that. The new one looked store-bought, sleek, soulless. I parked just far enough to see, but not be seen. She parks in my spot now. Her SUV always polished, always perfect. Sometimes I see her unloading groceries, yogurt I don't eat, cereal I never bought. Her hair is always done. She moves with that air of belonging, of comfort. She wears the robe I left behind. I didn't mean to. It was draped on the back of the door. I thought I'd be back to collect it. I wasn't. Sometimes I catch a glimpse through the window. A couch where our old one used to be. New throw pillows. A different painting above the fireplace. She's rearranged everything. Like we were just a rough draft she got to edit. Even the dining table is different. But the floor still creaks in the same spot near the kitchen. I wonder if she's noticed. I wonder if she blames the contractor. She probably doesn't know it creaked the night I told him I was pregnant, once. Briefly. Too briefly. And we held each other in that exact spot, afraid to move in case the world shattered. That memory's not there anymore. It's gone. Like it never happened. She hosts dinner parties now. I know because I see the extra cars lined up along the curb. People I don't recognize bringing in bottles of wine and laughing like the place was always meant for joy. Sometimes I sit and imagine walking in, not shouting, not crying, just standing there, letting them see me, letting the house remember. But I never do. Because what would I say? That chair used to hold my sadness. That window caught my happiest morning light. That corner over there, that's where I sat and learned how to forgive him. Again and again. No one wants to hear that. Not in a house full of laughter that isn't mine. It's strange, watching someone else live your life, but not quite. Like seeing a play based on your story, but with different actors, different lines, and the ending changed to suit someone else's taste. They didn't keep a single thing of mine. Not the photos, not the books, not the chipped coffee mug I drank from every morning while the world was still quiet. Even the scent is probably different now. It used to smell like cinnamon and old wood. Now it's all lemon and fabric softener. Like it's trying too hard to be clean. But the walls remember. They remember everything. The quiet sobs at 3 a.m., the slammed doors, the whispered apologies in the hallway. The way I used to hum while folding laundry. The way he stopped listening. They remember. Even if no one else does. Even if he doesn't. Even if I try not to. I don't hate them for moving on. I just wish I had been allowed to. Instead, they took everything. The memories, the space, the right to be remembered. And in return, I got silence. And an address I can't say out loud without my voice catching. I pull away from the curb slowly, like leaving a funeral. Because that's what it is, really. Not just the death of a marriage, but the burial of a home. Not a house. A home. There's a difference. And they don't know the difference. They just moved in. They moved in. I moved out of my own life. It started with the drawer. One of those drawers we all have, cluttered, half stuck, filled with things we mean to sort one day. Rubber bands, expired coupons, a few old photos, dried pens. I wasn't looking for anything. I was just tidying, trying to feel like I still had control over something. One sock, one paperclip, one empty envelope at a time. And then I found them. Crisp, yellowed, folded 3 times. Bank statements. Not recent ones, not at first. These were older. Some from the year we refinanced the house. Some from when we opened that joint savings account and promised we'd use it for something big. He wanted a boat. I wanted to replace the roof. We bought a grill instead. I kept reading, not even fully sure why. The numbers blurred a little, but I kept flipping. Then I hit the newer ones. The more recent printouts. Ones I didn't remember receiving. Ones I didn't know he still sent here. And that's when it clicked. My name was still there. Still, there, on the mortgage, on the equity loan, on the property tax receipts, and on the joint account, the one he stopped mentioning years ago. I stared at the pages, suddenly seeing them like blueprints instead of just bills. Not numbers, not balances. Proof. Proof that I wasn't erased. Not entirely. Not where it mattered. I had thought, no, assumed, that he'd rewritten everything. That I was a footnote, a ghost in the records. But I wasn't. I was still legally tied to the house, to the land, to the money. His new wife might be sleeping in my bed, cooking in my kitchen, but every time she flicked on a light, or flushed a toilet, or checked the mail, it was still under my name. I sat down, not dramatically, not in shock, just processing. It felt like discovering an old map to a place you forgot you ever owned. And for the first time in months, maybe years, I smiled. It was small, almost uncertain, but it stayed. Because for once, the ache gave way to something new. Not revenge, not rage, just clarity. He thought I was gone, forgotten, erased. But he'd moved too fast, too messy. He never removed me from the documents. He never finalized the ownership change. He never thought I'd check or care or know. He didn't expect me to look. He didn't expect me to matter. Because in his mind, once I was out of the picture belonged to him. But legally, financially, structurally, I was the picture. I was still part of the frame. I pulled out the dusty file box from under the bed, flipped through our old folder system, color-coded tabs, a system I'd created, utilities, insurance, mortgage, legal, and there it was, the deed. Both names, equal owners, no amendments, no transfers. I ran my finger over the paper like it was a relic, and in a way it was a relic of how much I had invested, of how much I had built, not just in love, but in bricks and dollars and lines of credit. It wasn't just emotional labor I had poured into that house. It was paperwork, responsibility, signature after signature, quiet sacrifices disguised as check marks. I had been written into that house in ink, not just in memory. He forgot that. He forgot me. But the paper didn't. The law didn't. And now, I remembered too. I folded everything gently, placed it in a clean folder, and set it aside. Not out of sight. Not this time. I wasn't sure what I was going to do yet. But I knew this. I wasn't powerless. Not anymore. Not on paper. Not in presence. Because he thought I was gone. He thought I'd vanished quietly, faded like a water stain on a wall no one bothers to fix. But I was still here. And I still had rights. And names matter. Mine still meant something. He replaced me too fast. He forgot I still had keys. The waiting room smelled like lemon disinfectant and old carpet. A silent television flickered above the chairs, playing a muted weather forecast no one cared about. I sat still, hands folded around a manila envelope, pulse steady. No nerves, no drama, just facts. The receptionist gave me a clipboard. I filled in the blanks. Name, birth date, reason for visit, property and asset review. I didn't need a tissue. I didn't need a second to think. I had done all my thinking already. When they called my name, I stood with the kind of grace that comes from knowing you're not here to ask. You're here to confirm. The lawyer was younger than I expected, maybe 35. Fresh suit, polite voice, no judgment in his eyes. That helped. He motioned to a seat, and I laid the envelope between us like a peace offering. I need to know what's still mine, I said. He nodded. Let's find out. We started with the deed. He read it once, twice, tapped his pen thoughtfully. Your name is still on the title. You're listed as a joint owner with survivorship rights. No quitclaim deed. No amendment. He didn't remove you. I already knew. But hearing it aloud was confirmation. A stamp of legitimacy on the wound I'd been carrying in silence. He moved on to the mortgage agreement. You're co-signed here. Still jointly responsible. Still jointly entitled. Another page. Another document. Another reminder that I hadn't been erased, just ignored. We reviewed the tax records, the home equity line, the joint savings account. My name was everywhere he'd forgotten to look. He assumed you'd walk away, the lawyer said, not unkindly. But legally you didn't. He leaned back in his chair, assessing me differently now. Not as a victim, but as a woman sitting on a sleeping giant of leverage. You have options, he said. I didn't nod. I didn't smile. I just waited. You can force a sale. You don't need his permission. As long as your name remains on the deed, you can initiate a petition action. Or, if you want something quieter, you can list your share for sale. He either buys you out or the house goes. Silence settled between us like dust. It wasn't joy I felt. It wasn't even triumph. It was relief. A quiet, clean, precise relief. Like finding the emergency exit in a burning building you built with your bare hands. What happens if he refuses? I asked. He shrugged. Then he learns what the law thinks of assumptions. I let the words sink in. No rage. No shouting. Just truth. He offered to draft a plan. I accepted. We reviewed next steps. Paperwork. Filing fees. Realtor referrals. My signature, not my screams, would change everything. I left with a folder under my arm and no apology in my heart. There was no need for revenge. No need to scream on porches or send angry letters or scratch paint off walls in the middle of the night. I wouldn't make a scene. I would make a sale. And not because I wanted to hurt him. Because I needed to free myself. And for the first time in what felt like years, I felt the faintest flicker of control return to my fingertips. Not the control you beg for, the kind you own. He had built his second life on a foundation he didn't check. A foundation I had laid, with my name signed beneath every brick. Now I would quietly remove it. Let him feel the tremor. Let them both wonder where the ground went. I drove home not with fury in my veins, but precision in my steps. I began gathering the rest of the papers. Receipts. Letters. Proof. I called the realtor the next morning. Spoke calmly. Used phrases like mutual property division and legal authority. Never once raised my voice. Never once told them what this was really about. Because it wasn't about them anymore. It was about me. Getting back what I never should have lost. Dignity. Agency. Power without noise. I didn't plan some elaborate revenge. I didn't plot to see them beg or crawl. I didn't want their pain. I wanted my peace. So I followed the law. I followed the paper trail. I followed the silence back to something solid. And I did it all without slamming a single door. Because when you know what you're worth, you don't need to shout it. You just prove it in print. I didn't plan revenge. I planned closure. I waited. Not because I was unsure. Not because I needed more time. I waited because timing is everything. Let them feel safe. Let them decorate. Let them believe the story was theirs now. From a distance, I watched their little transformations unfold like the opening act of a play that didn't know it was headed for a collapse. The porch was their first project. I noticed it one afternoon. Strings of solar lights dangling from the railing like cheap jewelry. Decorative signs with phrases like live, laugh, love in store-bought fonts. I had once hung a wind chime there. Hand-carved. A gift from my sister. They took it down. Said it was too noisy. They replaced it with a succulent wreath. I almost laughed. A week later, I saw them unloading bags of throw pillows, rolled up rugs, a pastel birdbath she likely found on sale. The yard had been stripped of its edges, its old familiar mess, the lived-in texture of my life replaced with catalog comfort. The front room curtains went up next. Not the lace ones I hand-stitched during a winter storm when the power was out. No, these were thick, gray, and sterile. The kind that block light and hold nothing in. I watched from my car, same parking spot as always. She was standing on a step stool, smoothing out a wrinkle near the curtain rod. He stood behind her, offering instructions, laughing like this was some sort of new beginning. They thought they were building. They thought this was growth. But they were renovating a house they didn't own. Not entirely. The irony was rich, almost beautiful. She was polishing my windows while I prepared to sell them from underneath her. He was changing doorknobs while I drafted a termination of joint tenancy. They made grocery lists. I made appointments. They hung mirrors. I gathered comps. They hosted neighbors for dinner. I filed preliminary notices with the realtor, who smiled and said, "It won't take long." I knew, because I knew the bones of that house better than anyone. I knew what cracked when it rained. I knew which corner sloped slightly left. I knew how to make it glow for just long enough to sell. Let them set the table. Let them plant flowers in soil that didn't belong to them. It was almost merciful, letting them play pretend, letting them fall into the illusion of permanence. She once posted a photo on social media. I don't follow her, but someone sent it to me. The caption said, "Home is where love lives." I tilted my head when I read it. Love doesn't live there. Ownership does. And only one of us still had the legal claim. I began preparing quietly, slowly, scheduled an appraisal, emailed the legal team, organized the documents into a crisp folder, color-coded and sharp. I didn't knock on the door. I didn't send a warning. What's the point in screaming at people who think they've already won? Better to let them dance in their confidence. Better to let them host another brunch. Toast with wine under fairy lights on the patio I pressure washed every spring. Let them brag about the new backsplash. Let them post a photo of the guest bathroom makeover. Let them dream, because dreams fall harder than expectations. I remember the day they installed the chandelier. I was there, just across the street. She stood beneath it, admiring her own taste. He kissed her on the cheek. I watched the light bounce off the glass and thought, that sparkle doesn't come from the fixture. It comes from not knowing what's about to hit you. I didn't hate them. I didn't even envy them, because they weren't winning. They were decorating a stage that was about to go dark. And I was holding the switch. Every curtain they hung, every wall they painted, every drawer they filled with silverware they picked out together, was rooted in the assumption that I was gone. And they were so sure of that, so smug in their domestic delusion. But assumptions are fragile things, like glass chandeliers, like fairy lights in storm season. I didn't have to raise my voice. I didn't have to touch a single brick. I just had to wait, because they forgot something simple. Foundations aren't built from paint and pillows. They're built from paper, from signatures, from names etched in deeds and rights they never questioned. I didn't remind them. I let them forget. Let them decorate. Because there's something deeply satisfying about watching people prepare for a future they don't know is already ending. And when it came down, it wouldn't be chaos. It would be consequence. It's easier to break what they think can't be broken. The pen felt heavier than it should have. It wasn't. Just standard weight. Smooth grip. Polished tip. But when I held it in my hand, ready to sign the listing agreement, it felt like a weapon. Not for war, but for reclamation. The realtor smiled. This shouldn't take long. I nodded, calm. My name printed clearly across the top of the document. Mine. Not his. Not theirs. Just mine. We sat in a quiet corner of the office, tucked away from the bustle of couples hunting for their first dream home, or retirees downsizing for the second act. I wasn't starting over. I was simply removing my name from something that had stopped deserving it. The house would be listed in 48 hours. Photographer scheduled. Lockbox arranged. Disclosures in motion. Everything running like clockwork. They had no idea. Back at the house, my house, the porch was draped in string lights for yet another dinner party. I saw the chairs being arranged from my usual vantage point. She wore a flowing blouse, the kind you put on when you think life is light and lovely and yours. They laughed as they carried in a bouquet of tulips. I wonder if she thought this was what victory looked like. Because while she planned place settings, I approved listing language. Charming 2-bedroom, full bath, remodeled kitchen, beautiful southern exposure, original hardwoods. I almost asked them to include foundation laid by a woman who was never supposed to come back. But I kept that part for myself. The market was hot. The offers came in quickly. 3 on the first day, 2 more by the next morning, all above asking. I reviewed each one with a quiet stillness. No rush, no excitement, just math and memory. I could see it clearly now, the illusion they had built. The decorations, the laughter, the smug stability. It all floated on something they never bothered to secure. They thought the house was theirs because they lived in it. But living in something doesn't make it yours. Ownership is silent, binding, legal. I didn't send him a message, didn't tip them off. The papers moved faster than they ever could have imagined. I signed a counteroffer while she posted a photo of a new welcome mat. Home sweet home, it said. I smiled at the screen, then clicked accept on the offer. The inspection was scheduled for Tuesday. I gave the realtor strict instructions, no early alerts. No discussions with occupants until paperwork was finalized. My name was still on everything. I had full legal right. It was clean, tidy, airtight. They were clueless. And I was composed, detached, not out of spite, out of peace. Because there's something beautifully ironic about people living confidently inside something that isn't really theirs. Like guests overstaying a visit they never knew was temporary. I watched her one morning tending to the flower bed she planted over the rose garden I once nurtured. She hummed, wiped sweat from her brow. She didn't know the soil belonged to someone else. She didn't know the garden had an expiration date. I almost pitied them, but not quite. They chose to ignore the details, the documents, the inconvenient truth of me. And now the truth was heading toward them with legal precision and a signature that didn't need their consent. I approved the final walkthrough date. The realtor would call them soon, schedule the showing, inform them of the sale. They'd be surprised, of course, confused, maybe angry, but surprise isn't injustice. It's just what happens when you mistake silence for surrender. I had never surrendered. I had waited. And now, the house was no longer their fantasy. It was a listing on the open market, a number, a deal, a final chapter signed by the woman they forgot was still holding the pen. I didn't need to knock. I didn't need to yell. All I needed was ink, law, and time. And time? Time had run out. They lived on borrowed ground. Time to collect. It was a Tuesday morning when the notice arrived. Not a stormy day. No thunder to set the mood. Just clean skies and sunlight slipping over the rooftops like nothing was about to change. The envelope was white. The font was neutral, professional, cold. It was hand-delivered, no drama, no noise. Just a firm knock on the door and a voice saying, for Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore. They opened it on the porch, the same porch where they had once toasted to fresh starts. The same place they'd hung lanterns and posed for photos and waved at neighbors like royalty on borrowed land. Now the Queen's face fell first. She read the letter once, then again, then passed it to him, slowly, as if she didn't believe her own eyes. The words were simple. Notice to vacate. You have 30 days to vacate the premises. The property has been sold. Legal action will follow if the deadline is not met. I didn't need to be there to know what followed. I imagined it instead. Imagine the way his face flushed, how he stood too quickly, the way the paper crumpled slightly in his hand as he read the name on the letterhead. My name. Still legal. Still binding. Still powerful. The calls began within minutes. First to the realtor, then to the lawyer, and finally to me. Blocked number. But I knew it was him. I let it ring, and ring, and ring. I didn't answer. What could he possibly say now that would undo the months, the erasure, the audacity of moving someone into a home without removing the woman who built it? I didn't need to hear him scramble. I could already hear it in the silence. The voicemail was short, clipped. We need to talk. This isn't right. Call me back. No, please. No apology. Just indignation wearing a mask of urgency. Another message came later that day, this one angrier. You've made your point. Now undo it. Don't be petty. Petty. That's what he called it. Not legal. Not fair. Not mine. Just petty. Because to him, the only version of power I was allowed to hold was the quiet kind. The type that folded laundry and kept secrets and cried in locked bathrooms. But this was visible power. Paper power. Undeniable and emotionless. This was what happened when the woman you dismissed remembered who she was. I imagined them arguing, her voice rising. You said it was yours. Him trying to stay calm. I thought she was done. She's not supposed to do this, but she can. I pictured her storming through the hallway, gathering picture frames in haste, wiping away fingerprints as if pretending they never touched the place would somehow let them stay longer. He probably called a lawyer next. Someone who read him the same line mine read to me. Her name is on the deed. She has every right. He might have begged after that. Or cursed. Neither mattered. Because I wasn't listening. I was at peace, not celebrating, not gloating, just still, letting it unfold, letting the machine I started months ago run its course with mechanical precision. The neighbors would whisper, of course. She sold it out from under them. She still owned it. Why didn't he see it coming? Why indeed? But I had learned, people only see what they believe about you. And he believed I was gone. Weak. Spent. He never imagined I'd come back quietly. He never imagined I would need to. I didn't show up for the confrontation. There was no need. They packed boxes under tense silence, dismantled the illusion one room at a time, rolled up rugs she bought on sale, pulled down the curtains she swore made the house feel softer. 30 days. That's what they had. 30 days to unlive what they thought was permanent. 30 days to walk through hallways that once felt like triumph, now lined with reminders of borrowed time. I imagine the final night was the hardest. When everything was packed and the only sounds left were echoes. Echoes of a life they built on someone else's foundation. I imagine her asking him, "Where will we go?" And him not having an answer. Because the thing about stolen thrones is they vanish when the real queen returns. And I didn't need to raise my voice. I didn't need to stand on the lawn waving a deed like a battle flag. The paperwork did the shouting for me. The silence I kept all those months had built to this, not a scream, not a war cry, but a verdict. They didn't just lose a home. They lost the comfort of believing I was gone. And when the last truck pulled away and the key was dropped in the realtor's hand, I didn't feel rage. I felt balance, because I wasn't kicking them out. I was walking in, back into the strength they forgot I had, back into the ownership they tried to pretend no longer existed, back into the truth. I wasn't evicting them. I was reclaiming me. It started with a buzz, then a ding, then a full vibration crawl across my kitchen table, as if the phone itself was restless, like it wanted me to care again. I looked at the screen once. His name, not saved as husband, not even as ex, just a number I never bothered to delete. 5 missed calls that first morning. By noon, it was 11. I didn't answer. Not out of spite. Just clarity. There was nothing left to say that hadn't already been signed, filed, and notarized. The voicemail transcripts piled up quickly. You've made your point. Can we just talk? I know I handle things badly. This isn't what she deserves. You're destroying everything. Destroying? No. I wasn't the one who forgot to check the deed. I wasn't the one who moved someone new into a house still legally tied to someone old. I wasn't the one who assumed silence meant surrender. The calls kept coming, sometimes angry, sometimes pleading, once even tearful, or at least trying to sound like it. But my hands never reached for the phone, because now, silence was no longer a wound. It was a boundary, a choice, a quiet I had finally made mine. One evening, a message came through from her. Not voice text, just 5 words. Why are you doing this? I stared at it a moment too long. There were so many ways to respond. I could have said, because you moved in like I never existed. I could have said, because you wore my apron, drank from my cup, and repotted my plants like you were rewriting my life. I could have said, because your love story began in the rubble of mine. But I didn't reply, because she wouldn't understand. Because I wasn't doing this to her. I was doing it for me. And if she couldn't see the difference, that wasn't my responsibility. The next day, another call. And the next. They came like clockwork, as if desperation had a schedule. My phone lit up while I read on the porch, buzzed while I brewed tea, flashed while I folded laundry in my new place, in my quiet, sunlit space that smelled of lavender and peace. I let it buzz. I let it blink. But I never let it back in. Because those calls weren't about fixing. They were about scrambling. About panic masquerading as repentance. About a man trying to undo the consequences of his choices with the same ease he made them. But life doesn't work like that. Not anymore. Not with me. They wanted resolution. I already had it. They wanted closure. I had signed mine weeks ago. They wanted mercy. I gave myself that first. And what they never understood is that the opposite of revenge isn't forgiveness. It's distance. Complete, untouchable, unapologetic distance. I kept the volume on low. Let the voicemail stack until my inbox was full. Never listened to a single one. I deleted them all in one swipe. It felt clean, like sweeping out a room that had sat too long in dust, like opening a window and finally breathing. Sometimes closure doesn't come with a conversation. Sometimes it's just a phone you refuse to answer. A life you no longer let interrupt your own. They made choices. They built a castle on assumptions. And when it crumbled, they called the woman they buried at the foundation, hoping she'd come back and hold it up. But I don't hold other people's weight anymore. I carry only what belongs to me. My name, my peace, my quiet. They made the mess. I left them to clean it. It sold fast. Not for the highest bid. Not to the wealthiest buyer. But to the one who was ready now. Ready to close, sign, and disappear into the house like it hadn't already carried 1,000 ghosts. I could have waited for more. I could have held out for a bigger number, a better offer, a louder win. But I didn't want to win. I wanted to leave. Sometimes freedom costs more than it's worth. And sometimes the only way out is to walk away before the roots pull you back under. The final walkthrough was scheduled for Thursday. They were already gone. Boxes loaded. Keys turned in. The curtains she picked out left on the floor, folded in a heap like they were too exhausted to keep pretending. When I walked in, it was silent. Truly silent. Not the kind of quiet that aches, but the kind that finally settles. The walls felt bare, but not empty, like they were exhaling for the first time. I stepped through the living room, ran my fingers across the fireplace mantel. It was dustier than I remembered. The mirror was gone. Good. It had reflected too much. The dining room was smaller than I remembered. Funny how spaces shrink when the memories are cleared out. The kitchen still had the same stubborn tile with the crack near the sink. I had always meant to fix it. Now I wouldn't have to. I walked down the hall, touching the walls as I passed. The guest room, where we stored everything we didn't know how to let go of. The closet where I used to tuck love letters behind old sweaters. The bathroom where I once cried quietly with the water running, so no one would hear. All of it still here. All of it no longer mine. And yet, always a part of me. In the bedroom, the scent was different. Their scent lingered, faint and foreign. Perfume I didn't recognize. Detergent I wouldn't use. But beneath it, if you really inhaled, the ghost of my lavender sachets still clung to the corners. I stood in the center of the room. Spun once. Not to see, just to feel. Then I went back to the kitchen, opened the drawer beside the fridge, the junk drawer, the one that held tape, batteries, old menus, and 1,000 paper clips no one ever used. I pulled out the magnet with the chipped corner, the one from our honeymoon road trip, and stuck a note under it. No anger, no poetry, just truth. She lived here once, but not anymore. I didn't sign it. I didn't have to. The walls knew my name. The floorboards remembered my footsteps. The door still shut the way I taught it to. I took one last look at the backyard, bare now, stripped of flowers, even the tulip bulb she planted already pulled up as if trying to take something with her. But roots don't follow you. They stay where they were planted. And mine were pulled. Not by force, by choice. I walked out without looking back. Locked the door with one soft click. Dropped the keys into the envelope the realtor gave me, and walked away with nothing in my hands, but everything in my heart, because sometimes what you built becomes too heavy to carry. And letting go isn't weakness, it's wisdom. It's a woman choosing herself over a structure that no longer serves her. I didn't sell it to hurt them. I sold it to unburden me, even if it meant getting less than it was worth, because some houses appreciate in value, and some you sell for peace. I sold it for less, just to leave it behind. The new place wasn't big. One bedroom. A kitchen that could barely fit two people shoulder to shoulder. No marble countertops. No walk-in closet. No chandelier. Just soft light through linen curtains. A front porch that creaked when you stepped just right. And a quiet that didn't press against your chest like a secret. It settled there like a friend. I found it tucked between two oak trees on the edge of town. A rental. No long-term promises. But the minute I walked in, I exhaled without meaning to. because it didn't echo with anyone else's laughter or silence. It was clean, bare, blank in the best way, like a page waiting for my handwriting. The first night, I slept with the windows open. The breeze drifted in like an old song. No traffic noise, no whispered arguments down the hall, just the rustle of leaves and a distant owl. I didn't dream of the old house. I didn't dream at all. I just slept. And when I woke up, I didn't cry. I made tea on a stove that hummed a little too loudly, but it didn't matter. I poured it into a chip mug I found at a thrift store and stood barefoot in the kitchen, watching sunlight stripe the walls like gold ribbon. I was alone, but not lonely. I started cooking again, not out of obligation, but for the joy of chopping vegetables with the radio humming in the background, for the scent of garlic filling the air, for the comfort of feeding myself with both hands. I bought fresh flowers from the market every Friday, whatever looked brightest. I didn't arrange them perfectly. I let them spill and bend and lean the way they wanted to. I stopped checking my phone for missed calls. I stopped wondering if he'd say sorry, because I didn't need an apology anymore. I just needed the quiet. The kind that doesn't feel like punishment, but peace. The kind that lets you hear your own thoughts, not your own fears. The kind that makes a tiny space feel endless. Neighbors waved. I waved back. No one asked about my past. No one knew my name with someone else's last. They just saw a woman moving into her space, box by box, breath by breath. I bought a second-hand bookshelf and filled it with all the novels I had meant to read when I was too busy holding up someone else's life. Now I held stories of women who left, who changed, who healed. I underlined the lines that felt like me. I lit candles that smelled like vanilla and sea salt, left the dishes in the sink without guilt, took walks in the evening just to feel the breeze against my skin. And every night I closed the door behind me, turned the lock, and felt safe. Not because someone else was inside, but because no one else had to be. This space, it didn't need chandeliers, or high ceilings, or brand new finishes. It needed nothing but me. And for the first time in years, that was enough. I didn't chase more. I didn't ache for grandeur. Because peace doesn't come with granite counters. It comes with silence that doesn't sting, with freedom that doesn't apologize, with air that feels like yours. It comes with a night light in the hallway and a pot of soup on the stove and music playing softly as you water plants that finally bloom. I don't know how long I'll stay here. Maybe a year. Maybe forever. It doesn't matter. Because here I'm not rebuilding. I'm just living. Fully. Simply. Freely. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. The table is small now. Just one chair. No centerpiece. No polished silver. Just a simple plate, a fork, and a glass of water catching sunlight like a prism. I sit with the window open. The breeze carries the scent of rosemary from the little pot I planted on the sill. It rustles the napkin in my lap, brushes against my skin like a reminder, you made it. I eat slowly. No rush. No noise. Just the clink of the fork and the quiet hum of a life that no longer needs permission. The difference isn't in the recipe. It's in the air. It doesn't carry tension anymore. It doesn't hold ghosts. It doesn't echo with steps that no longer arrive. This silence is mine. This peace is earned. There was a time when I set a table for someone who never really sat with me. When I measure my worth in how warm I kept the food, how still I kept my voice. But now I measure it in the stillness I no longer fear, in the joy I no longer chase. I built dinners on empty promises. Now I build meals on my own rhythm. I glance at the doorway, not out of habit, but to admire the light that falls through it just right. I don't need more. I don't need less. I need this. Because in the end, yes, we built a house, but I built a life. They built a fantasy. I built freedom. Sometimes the loudest power is the one that doesn't shout. It doesn't beg. It doesn't break dishes or slam doors. It just leaves, calmly, quietly, with every piece of its dignity intact. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. When your worth is questioned, when your love is replaced, when your presence is no longer honored, you don't fight to stay. You choose to go. Not because you're weak, but because your peace is too expensive to trade for chaos. You don't need to prove anything to the people who decided you were disposable. You don't need to scream to be heard by those who already tuned you out. You just need to remember who you are and walk away like the ground was never theirs to stand on. So, if you're watching this and your heart aches where it used to feel full, if you've ever been silenced, replaced, or made to feel invisible, know this. You don't have to burn everything down to feel powerful. Sometimes, the most graceful revenge is rebuilding somewhere they'll never be allowed to follow. Have you ever had to walk away to be free? Share your story below. There's strength in starting over. Because in the end, some women burn bridges. I sold the whole island.